involved in local politics. I don't know about everyone else, but I feel like I have, like every one of my tech friends seems to have some sort of project they're doing about how tech is going to solve politics, but at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is having people in office legislating. And if we care about doing that, I think it's important that we also step up. And so, Stevon, I've known for about 2 years, maybe. We initially met through a dinner that was arranged by a friend of his who's involved in the New Leadership Council, which I will ask you to explain more about later. Stevon ran for office in 2014 and came very close with over 50,000 votes. You said you're like within 1% of the winner. And he ran again this past year and won a seat on the San Francisco School Board with over 155,000 votes. So I thought it would be really interesting to walk through his process and how he's gotten here. And so I was thinking maybe we can do like a sort of 15-minute, if you want to talk about just sort of your process, or I can ask questions and then we can open it up. And actually, frankly, let's just make this sort of free-form Q&A. If anyone has a question at any point, put up your hand, and hopefully I think we all have a lot to learn from you. So thank you for making time and coming in today.
Yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, it's good to meet all of you, or see you at least. Hope I get the chance
We'll have
to know you. Was everyone here in San Francisco, November 2016? Anyone come here since the election? Okay, new to the city?
Not really here.
Say
Traveling through.
Traveling through. Okay, so has anyone heard of the San Francisco Board of Education?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, do you know how many members on the school board? So is it helpful for me to just go over what the school board is?
I don't think you're gonna find there's a lot of parents in this crowd.
That's not entirely true. We do have
Some. I said not a lot.
Okay, any public school parents? Parents, period?
Preston, he's not here.
What's that?
Here's one.
Is your daughter in public schools?
No.
Okay, great. So yeah, so the San Francisco Board of Education oversees the Unified School District, so the San Francisco Unified School District. We are unique in San Francisco because we're a city and a county. So in like Alameda County, there are several school districts. San Francisco just has one, and that district is governed by public officials. There are 7 of us, and our major job is to hire and fire superintendents. We set policy for the school district, approve budgets, make sure we're in compliance with all state and federal law, set curriculum standards, graduation requirements, and admissions policies. So people often hear about the school district through our wacky school assignment policy. School assignments are being an issue in a lot of cities. The way that the Board of Education elections work is, if you look at the map of San Francisco, our positions are citywide. The races stagger 4 up, 3 up for the 7. So in 2014, I ran in a 3-seat cycle. In 2016, I ran in a 4-seat cycle. The winner is the top 3 or 4 vote getters in that election cycle. So in my first race, there were 9 candidates, 3 people won. In this past race, I think there were 10 or 11 candidates and 4 of us won. So that is, the high level overview. The makeup of the board right now is actually majority male. This is the first time it's been that in a long time. For a while it was like 6 women, 1 man. Now it's 4 men, 3 women. I'm the youngest member of the board. I'm 32. The next oldest member is a man named Matt Haney. He's about 35, I think. And then the next youngest age is 41. It goes up until mid-60s, the other members of the board. Most of us come to the work through some type of engagement in education. For me, I went through the school system here. I was raised in an area in a city called, I was raised in public housing in San Francisco, in the Diamond Heights area. If you guys know Diamond Heights. Okay. So there's like some co-op public housing units that are in that vicinity of the city. I moved with my grandparents at the age of 10, and they raised me from then until I graduated from college. I went to Williams College in Massachusetts and came back. So high level, little me, little school district. And now I can talk about the politics of running a race.
Yeah, well, do just a little bit more of your own bio. So from Williams to here, what were some of the jobs that you did post-college?
Yeah, my first job out of college was at a program called City Hall Fellows. And that was kind of like a Teach for America for local government. They took recent college graduates from pretty prestigious schools. We all, interviewed to get a job as a part of a one-year placement program in a high-level government office. And the idea was that you put the talented graduates in local government, because local government has this aging workforce. Nobody wants to go to local government. So we'll expose these students or these recent graduates so they can be on the track to be leaders in government. So this was the first year that the program had run. There was a similar program called New York Urban Fellows, which was sort of modeled after. And that year, I was in the Department of Public Works in the performance measurement sort of division of the finance office, and I looked at potholes. It was like the most basic function of how you can see if your city is working for you or not.
You looked at potholes?
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
So the city has a cement plant where we also will create asphalt, and every morning a huge batch is created and is put on like 4 or 5 different pothole filling cars, and they drive around the city responding to reports of where potholes are. So that's what.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So in the report that I looked at, we had a GPS tracker on every pothole truck, and we had a list of work stops of where they said they did work. So when I tracked the stops next to the work, it was a way to see if work was actually happening. On average, we had about 90 minutes of stops that weren't related to work stops. That's on top of what I deducted from what their break time was supposed to be. So it was, there's actually closer to 2.5 hours of non-work stops, but I took away that 60 minutes, and then on average, we had about 90 minutes of stops that we didn't know what was happening at. The locations of the stops were sometimes at Ocean Beach. Park.
Did they know that there was GPS?
Yes, but part of the contract was that you couldn't use GPS as a management tool, which is why they union allowed the tracker to be on the car. So it was like my first introduction to how government works. But in talking to the members of the crew, what you heard from them, most of the people there, have been working there over 15 years, and what they had saw was the scope of their work being really minimized and outsourced to other contractors, and not really feeling like they were being fully utilized, and kind of getting stuck in this rut where there's no upward mobility. The pride they had from their work was being cut down, and so we have these long-standing government employees that actually really care about doing their job, but they don't feel like there's this lack of morale, or we have low morale, all these other issues. So I can get into like pothole stuff.
Yeah.
That's
interesting. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what was the next thing after City Hall Fellows?
The next thing was so I went to Thurgood Marshall High School, which is in Bayview, Hunters Point, and I got an opportunity to go back to the school to work there as an academic advisor. And the history of Thurgood Marshall, my history of Thurgood Marshall, is, I think, really instrumental. It's really helpful in letting people know why I decided to run for the school board. When I was a student at Thurgood, the school was created, it's a lot of history around Thurgood. The school was created out of a lawsuit that the NAACP played against the school district, saying that the school district wasn't abiding by the separate, the Brown versus Board of Education decision saying that schools were not supposed to be separate, supposed to be integrated, and the quality of education was supposed to be equal. So they were saying that the schools were segregated and they were unequal, and the school district was liable and were suing you. So, the case moved up through the courts, and a decision was decided called the consent decree, which mandated the school district reorganize schools on the southeast part of San Francisco and Baby Hunters Point. Baby Hunters Point, for those of you new to the city, is the historic, largely African-American neighborhood of San Francisco. There was a huge shipyard that was created at Baby Hunters Point, which was a part of the war effort that recruited a lot of African Americans from the South to build ships. My grandfather worked on the shipyard. My grandmother's father bought a home in the Fillmore, which was, called the Harlem of the West. There was no, it's Hayes Valley now. A very different neighborhood, but there were only black people in the Fillmore. My grandmother still lives there. So Thurgood Marshall was created out of that lawsuit, and the way that it distinguished itself from other schools in the city was that it had a higher graduation requirement than the surrounding schools. So the graduation requirement for Thurgood was 280 credits. For every other high school, it was 230 credits. And that meant that all the students that graduated had more than they needed in terms of the college eligibility requirements. So they were all eligible to go to a four-year school. So at the time, Thurgood was sending more African American Latino students to college than any other high school in San Francisco. And when we all got there, we all got a computer. They got like these busted computers that they had floppy disk, and it was like a few years old, but I loved it. Like I learned how to type on it. I looked up colleges on it, and they gave me that, and they said everyone here is going to college. So my senior year, we selected a new superintendent that was on a mandate to leave her mark on the school. That ran it, and so she didn't like the different graduation requirements that Thurgood had. The founding principal of the school wasn't going to budge, so she ousted the founding principal, put a new principal in that was sort of there to do her bidding, and a fight broke out on campus. And fights happen at every school, but when the fight broke out, police were called, and after the police were called, more police came to the campus. This is my senior year of high school, and they called backup. They got picked up on the news wires, and then there were helicopters hovering the school and news cameras on campus. Then there was a SWAT team on campus doing military formations in the school. It was one of my fellow colleagues on the board now, Mark Sanchez, told me that it was the largest police presence on a high school since Columbine. And so if you're a parent of an 8th grader thinking about where to send your kids to high school, where's Thurgood on your list?
Is Thurgood a charter school?
No, it was a public school.
It's a public school, but I don't actually fully know how the San Francisco schools use. I know school assignment isn't it random or something? It has nothing to do with your address.
It's. I can get into that. I can get into school assignment. Just so I can finish this part about because Thurgood.
Why did they send the SWAT?
That's a good question.
But yeah, how about this fight? What are we talking here?
There were no guns on campus. It was a fight between kids. No weapons were found. It was just a gross over. It was just, I don't know. But to this day, we still don't know why the police presence was so aggressive.
The fight had something to do with the change in policy?
The new personnel on campus didn't know how to respond to the situation.
Oh.
And the fight.
Yeah.
Explaining.
Right.
It was the new principal who was brought in because the old principal wouldn't change the policy. The new principal was the one who initially couldn't handle the fight and got authorities involved. I gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so this colored your decision to go back to Thurgood Marshall? or-
Well, so what happened to the school after this fight, I talked about who wants to send their kids there. The school's enrollment went from 1,100 to 450. It had 9 principals in 7 years. And it went from being known as the Black Lowell, which is like Lowell High School is our most prestigious high school. And when I went back to the school to work there, the kids were calling the school Thurgood. And so, you know, over the course of my lifetime, my brief, not even my lifetime, like, you know, a few years, I saw what bad policy and bad decisions could do to a school community. And so that's how I got back to Thurgood. When I got back to Thurgood, the principal at the time, I just went there to go play pickup basketball with one of my former teachers invited me, and my time at the City Hall Fellows was ending, and he asked if I wanted to come back to Thurgood, and I was like 24 at the time, and I felt it was feeling very underutilized in my job, so I thought this was an opportunity to just get back to the school that really changed my life, and so that's how I got back into education. So, school assignment. Any other questions about?
Okay, and just to round out the bio, so there was that, and then did you do that until you became CEO of Mission Bay?
No. That was in. I'm sorry, this is so disjointed. I usually like to just like sew a bunch of fingers. It's been a long day. No, that was in 2000. I got back to Thurgood in 2009, and that's when the financial crisis was starting to really hit counties. So, you know, all the jobs left in the private sector. Government usually wants to make cuts at the last minute. We had these massive layoffs of teachers, and I was in a classified position, so I was bumped in 2009, I think 2010. So, you know, we have seniority, so last in, first fire type of hiring policy. After Thurgood, I went to the San Francisco Education Fund and started working with a wider network of high schools around improving post-secondary outcomes. So I was working with principals and counselors and making resources to improve graduation rates at a collection of schools. Then I ran for office and lost in Michigan.
Yeah. So, yeah, in terms of just the nuts and bolts of running for office, what is the timeline? What do you have to file? Like, what is the actual process that you start in order to go down that path?
Yeah. And you got a question too, is it?
Well, it was just with your anecdote about what happened to your high school. Is that, I mean, would you say that was sort of like a one-off, or is it kind of an example of like the kind of shady things that can happen in local government because nobody's paying attention?
I mean, you know, there's not massive police presence in all high schools, like, but what we see that happens in terms of like, you know, how schools improve, Thurgood had everything in place to take a school in a low-income community and make it thriving, and personalities do get in the way, and it ends up harming the entire school community. So that is consistent, but yeah, a lot of crazy stuff happens in local government. But, yeah, I guess this is one of it, not necessarily connected, but yeah.
I'm actually curious about that. How long had Thurgood been like a model school, and how long did it take for it to like just kind of go downhill? Really, like it sounds like pretty rapidly.
Yeah. So the first graduating class was in '98, which means the school was started in '94, and I graduated in 2003. So we're talking about a very brief window of time when the school was really hitting on all cylinders. So nuts and bolts of running for office. Does anyone know people like personally that ran for office? Okay.
A number of people. Let's see. I mean, I'm good friends with Jamoke Hinton Hodge over in Oakland on the school board, and a couple people over there.
Okay.
I've gotten involved in local races, and I was just curious to be around here.
I have a friend who, I think he was running for a district supervisor seat in Santa Barbara County, and he didn't get nominated, so he wound up running for a community service district seat, which he actually got, and and I think I really worry about him now. Every time I talk to him, he sounds kind of like he wants to die because of that job. But yeah, I heard the whole sordid story of him, like from his idea, like I think I might run for office, all the way up through, oh God, I have this horrible job. No, I'm not saying all public servants are terrible. I'm just telling you the story of who I know and what I know about it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that perspective. So, you know, school board in San Francisco is incredibly competitive. It's really competitive. It's a citywide race. The way that it works is you file papers with the Department of Elections and the Ethics Commission and the Secretary of State, and all of that, when all is in place, it allows you to solicit money to raise for your campaign.
So how far in advance do you file those papers?
Well, the filing deadline is in August.
For the race the following November, like
for the
a
race
year
that
and
year.
3
No,
months?
no.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that for August for that same year.
Oh, okay.
That's when the deadline is. But typically, people, you know, I started both my races in January, so I ran the campaign for 10 months, and
Because that just lets you start fundraising. So you can't fundraise until you've done that.
right,
Okay.
right, yeah. But usually, you start laying the groundwork for the political support you need before you actually file your papers, because you want to get a sense of, you know, who in the political spectrum is going to back me. Hopefully, he does some calculations to say if I can get this, and this in place, you know, I have a shot. For my first run, my whole world was in education, so I didn't know anybody in politics. One person recruited me to run for school board. I was interested in politics, but I didn't know how to get started. So there was one school board member, her name was Kim Shree-Malthus, and I went to high school with their daughter. And you know, she maybe like around 2012, we started conversations about me running. I was supposed to run that year, but I really wasn't ready to do it. I was like 25, 26, and I got really serious about it in the coming election year for 2014. Initially, the big political players in San Francisco for a school board race are the Teachers Union and the Democratic Party, the San Francisco Democratic Party. The Teachers Union didn't want to support me, and the San Francisco Democratic Party was more moderate leaning versus progressive leaning, which the moderate progressive factions in San Francisco are the two major political forces that exist here. Yes.
Why are the unions so powerful? Because, I mean, I know there are many teachers, but there are not hundreds of thousands of teachers in San Francisco, so why are these so powerful?
We're a pro-union city, San Francisco is, so with the teachers are backing school board candidates, and then, you know, that matters to voters.
How did you? How did you discover that teachers union didn't want to support you? Like, what was
They told me.
What was their rationale?
Yeah.
This nice guy, you know, his heart's in the right place, but people, you know, I don't know, you know, people, the politics is not scientific, you know.
Yeah.
It is, it's about, you know, the work you put in, how well you communicate, and proving yourself in the political world. And I hadn't done any of that stuff before. I hadn't proven myself politically before I sat down with them.
just quick follow? Did the union head talk to you? Like, did they say like? Did they give you like any heads up beforehand before coming to their evaluations so that you could?
Well, this is the initial conversations.
So it started that way.
This is how it started. Yeah, but they actually ended up endorsing me. They were my biggest supporters the first year and the second year.
Right.
First race and second race.
Yeah, I was actually curious about like how them deciding to endorse you or not happens. So I guess it sounds like you were put in touch with them and they ended up endorsing you for future races. It sounds like how did they arrive to that? like, do they meet and then someone tells you, or?
Yeah, so the teachers union has a leadership group that's selected by the membership. They have a president, a vice president, and a political director. The political director is a person that, you know, is meeting with the candidates for that race and involved in a lot of the other political actions happening across the city in multiple races. So the conversation with Kent Trey, he's retiring this year, is how it started. I met with him, then I met with the union leadership. So the way that the endorsement works is you submit a questionnaire. They give you like 30 questions. You have to, this happens for a lot of the political clubs. They give you a ton of questions. You have to do a written response, and then you speak to the membership. But typically what actually happens is that before you walk in the door, before the questionnaire is complete, everyone's mind is made up. So I haven't seen those actually really sway people, but your name, how it carries from group to group, can be, you know, will be, is what matters most. Like, so Ken Trey is telling these section of political clubs, Stevon is our guy. Then, you know, some of them are a little more independent than others, but they all trust the teachers because they're so close to the issue, so that can really help with those groups.
So, pardon the ignorance, but in my circle of friends, usually teachers' unions have a really bad reputation. So I would have thought that San Francisco, being as progressive as it is, was actually on that front probably anti-union. Why do you think that San Francisco is so union when it comes to teachers and litigation?
Yeah, well, the unions have been like a nationally polarizing issue, you know, and so the birth of the charter movement is like, you know, so also like an anti-union movement is something that as a country we've been discussing and debating for a long time. San Francisco is, you know, I mean, for the most part, is a pro-union city because unions are Democrats. And so the tipping point for shifting people's perceptions of unions and how they vote hasn't arrived here, you know, so they still have a lot of sway. So anybody, I mean, no matter how, I run into people that really hate unions also, and the people that, you know, hate them most are usually the most vocal, but they actually aren't that many people, you know, when you consider how much voting sway the union has. Like when I'm coming up to most voters, and since most people will ask me, oh, so who's supporting you? And if I said teachers unions, oh, okay, the teachers back you out, I got you. Their parents were teachers, right? I mean, their neighbors may be teachers. The sentiment and support of teachers in San Francisco, I don't know if you've been following the news reports about what's happening around teacher housing in the city. We have teachers that are homeless, that are commuting 2 hours to come to school. They aren't getting paid enough. There's like, you know, there's a lot of public support for teachers. So when the union puts out this mailer that says teacher support, you know, that's who people want it back.
So of the 50,000 votes that you won, like what percentage would you say was delivered by teachers unions?
That's sort of hard to sift out. What's a better indicator? So I mean, a lot. You know, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, so I think that actually draws into an interesting point of like, how do you target who you're going to get the vote out with, and how do you reach them, and do you have any way of sort of measuring and polling and figuring out who was most, like where your time was best spent, if you want to translate that into future races?
Yeah, so I can answer that. And one thing I want to also just section off about the teachers union is that their support especially matters for the school board race. If you're running for mayor, you don't need the teachers to win. If you're, I mean, in the Senate race, Scott Wiener won, and the teachers were strongly backing Jane Kim, if you guys remember that race. And also in the assembly race, David Chu won, the teachers were strongly backing David Campos. And so The teacher support matters a lot. They have people that they can put out to do voter outreach. They have an expenditure account that can raise money to help fund your campaign, like a lot of political organizations do. But they're not everything. So just to get to your question about the map, because I mean, most people don't hear about school board candidates. If you go into the ballot, you might skip that on your ballot. You might be like, oh, he's good. You know, that person sounds cool. Oh, this person's a teacher. Oh, this person's a, you know. I mean, some of you, I'm sure, sit down a week before, do your highlights, do your ballot, you read all of our stories, and you're like, okay, you know, these are people that I like. But that's a very small segment of people.
On that point, what was your ballot designation? What did you tell people?
Nonprofit education leader.
Okay.
That's what I am.
It's not a lie. But that's important.
You could have said director too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my first time it was like senior education coordinator.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said you had the teachers union endorsement both times, right? So even that endorsement, while really helpful, is not enough to deliver.
Right. So the teachers
Necessarily,
union
yeah.
endorsement and Democratic Party, those are the two things I mentioned as being most important for a low ballot race like mine that doesn't have high visibility.
Well, so how many people did the teachers union endorse though? Because you said 4 people. I mean, did they endorse all 4 of the top candidates? There were 11 candidates total. How many
Right.
got
So in
that?
the first race, actually, they had 3 to endorse. They only endorsed 2 of us. And in the second race, they had 4 to endorse, and they only endorsed 3 until the very last minute. They endorsed the 4th person. And so,
And they won.
and all 4 of us that they endorsed won this time. So there's also a difference in turnout around, you know, presidential years. We all know more people turn out when there's a presidential election. 2014 was historically dismal turnout across the country. You know, it was my first race out in a year where people that are more likely to vote for me aren't voting. So that all contributed to me not winning in the first race.
When you're campaigning, is that a full-time job, or are you doing this while you're also balancing the other?
Yeah, for bigger races, people do leave work for like bigger offices, but we all have to. I mean, we're all working during the campaign. Like for me, my first race, I had vacation time, and at Mission Bid, it was it's an education startup, so there's no money for vacation time. I ran and worked throughout, and and all of us now have full-time jobs and serve on the school board.
So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, so when you decided to run, did you create how big was the team that you kind of put around you, and then how much money did you have to raise or did you want to raise, and how much did you actually raise each time?
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning, how competitive the race is. So, in my first race, I raised somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000, and in my second race, it was between 60 and 70 or something like that. I heard about a woman that won a school board race in El Monte, which is like somewhere in LA, and her goal was to raise $4,000. She really wanted to raise $4,000, and she didn't raise a dime, and she won the race. And I was like, I need to run in El Monte. So you know, in my first race, I was the top fundraiser. In my second race, I was the second. In 2016, I think Matt raised over $100,000. He also got like the most votes that has ever gotten in the history of a school board race.
So, sorry, and what are you using that money for? Like, how big is the team, and what are you using?
Yeah, I can answer that part. So the team usually consists of me and my friends. Me and my friends, and the people that there's not a big volunteer operation for the school board race. A lot of the money is used for materials and your consulting, your website, and mail. There's the mail that I put out as a candidate, and then there's a cost to be on a slate for a group that's endorsing you. So like Democratic Party, the cost of their slate even, so they have to endorse me. And then once they endorse you, they charge you to be on their mail. So like, so it's like $1,000 or $750. And then they have political events where you can sponsor a table. And so you go to that event to get exposure to the people that will maybe endorsing you, so those events cost. But most of the money goes to mail materials.
So it's still traditional mail, it's not digital advertising, like you targeted advertising? We all using online advertising at some level. It's not really what's swaying voters, because most people in our age group still aren't, more of us vote, but still not a lot. And for the people that definitely turn out, the older group, they're looking at mail, but they care more about the endorsers that are coming to them in the mail. So when they see that you're backed by certain people that they like, as opposed to just a mail on its own. Right.
What other outside forces are there at play in San Francisco education politics? In Oakland, there's an ed reform group in Oakland. They spent $750,000 on the school board races last time around. And then in LA, just this last week, it was reported, the CEO of Netflix was just dropping millions into these races. Did you see that? Because I've worked with both candidates and on the dark side, super PAC stuff. Did you see that while you're just kind of walking through and telling people, hey, I'm running for school board?
Nah, and I think it's because of the strength of the union here.
Okay.
I think it's because they think this is not a winnable thing for them. All those people are really calculated.
Yeah.
So they don't really play out here.
Okay.
Oakland, LA, Sacramento, they're heavier out there.
Yeah, I was just curious.
So let's say, for people in this room, how would you advise, thinking about whether you should run? Because it sounds like you were thinking about it, many years in advance, before you actually won your election. How do you begin to think about, okay, in 5 years, this is, I'm going after, what's the runway? What's the lead time? What's the process?
Yeah, well, if you're asking that question to yourself already, I don't know if you're already, that's something you ask yourself, then you're much closer to actually doing this than most people. Running for office, the only way I know how to describe it is, it's something that really has to come. You have to actually want it, and you have to want it enough to make all the necessary sacrifices to put yourself through the process. So when you do it, the year or whatever, that's only an outcome of you already saying, okay, I'm gonna do this. So for me, all of the conventional first, second step, if you thought of this thing, it was what is the progression before you're actually a winnable person? None of that was in the calculus for me. I wasn't a winnable candidate at all. I didn't come from a political family. No one I knew was in politics, but I knew I wanted to serve at this level, and I really had the drive to put myself out there and try to push for it. So, if you're asking me, if you're saying running for office is something I want to do, then run for office. You should, yeah.
But how often,
I don't know if that was helpful.
So post Trump getting elected, you have all these organizations like Run for America and Run for Something and something like
I was supposed to be on a call with them today.
Oh, right. Something like 13,000 women have signed up to run. But I guess my question is, how often have you seen in these down ballot races and these first step into government positions, have you seen people with no associated background actually win? You have an associated background to win for the school board. You worked in education your whole life, right? I know some younger folks who tried to run for mayor in New York this past time, who is just they don't have, I guess, those kind of correlated background despite having the desire and being I want to get in, So I don't know, how have you seen a lot of people who don't necessarily have the direct background but still have the desire to actually be able to win folks over?
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that. That's the thing, is that doesn't mean you're gonna win.
Yeah.
Being a winning candidate and running for office is two different things. But Yeah, and I'm not inclined to support somebody to run for office
Right.
if they have no real connection to what the school board does, especially not having served on the school. Now that I serve on the school board,
Yeah.
my my bar for who should be participating is
It's changed
shifted
a
a
lot,
lot.
yeah.
And it's so funny too, because that's how people looked at me like exactly. They were looking at me like, who the hell?
Yeah.
Kid think he is, barely 30, wanting to run a school district that serves 55,000 people, 8,000 employees, like the nerve,
Yeah.
But I get where they're coming from now, absolutely.
Right.
Well, so a little bit, can you talk a little bit about your experience so far in office and like what is the time commitment? Because you do have a full-time job aside from it. What's the time commitment and what are you actually doing in your hours?
Yeah, so the school board is another full-time job. On a good week, I was trying to do a breakdown of how many hours I spend a week on this, and there really is just no way to stay on top of it week to week. Like this event, right? This is like a politically connected event that I would not be participating in if I went on the school board. And there are a ton of things that happen like this that are politically related because I'm an elected official, that are additional time commitments in addition to the work that is actually required to be an effective commissioner. So just the required time for me as a school board is really only connected to the time that I have to spend in meetings, in school board meetings, and all of those are in the evening. So over the course of a month, I go to 5 meetings, 2 full board meetings, one public televised meeting, a committee of the whole, and I serve on 3 separate committees: rules, curriculum, and personnel. So meetings sort of depend on the time and the agenda. The last school board meeting I was at went 6 hours. And so we had our regular board meeting, and then we had a closed session meeting where we go over stuff that I can't legally talk about. And those meetings, can go in past midnight. So that's just the meeting time. If I want to talk to somebody about what's happening, I got to do it during their work hours, right? So I'm not at my job. And if I want to actually observe schools, I have to go to schools when the schools are in session. So the way I try to break down my week is Tuesday afternoons, I set aside for a meeting with school leadership and personnel. I want to update on how science is going. I want to update on the vacancies for teachers. All that stuff happens Tuesday afternoon. And then Friday mornings, I commit to visiting school sites. So I've spent, since January, most of my Fridays at middle schools because I was mostly working in high schools. And so I was trying to get a better sense of how middle schools are working. And now that people, know me and have issues related to the schools, they contact me when they get ready about whatever issue is concerning them. So, like last week, a mother called me. She was threatening the school district because she said the school wasn't following her kids' IEP. IEP is an individual education plans for students in special ed. And later that day, a principal called me complaining about cuts to actually the special ed, saying that you're cutting our teachers, like, what are you guys going to do about this? Another teacher called me the same day saying that they don't want their principal back and they're organizing to keep their principal from coming back. And so, these are all the calls that I get related to the school board. Sometimes the calls take an hour, sometimes they take 30 minutes. So I, Mission Vid, so poor Mission Vid. Mission Vid right now it's a growing organization, and it's really hard to take the time away from it to work on this stuff. So yeah, it's another full-time job. We get paid $500 a month. That's before taxes. After taxes, it's $449.
Oh my God.
I get paid on the 31st.
get a benefits package, right?
Oh, I get health insurance, and the health insurance is actually like,
Something.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you know, now that I run an organization where I have to pay for health insurance, it's like, you know, it's
Wait,
a
that's
cost.
actually, how is that possible? That's like below minimum wage. Like, how is that?
It's
how
part of
is
the
that-
city charter, so that's what the city's approved commissioners get paid.
They hard coded that number,
Yeah.
or so it doesn't adjust for inflation.
Well, how often does it get raised?
It doesn't.
Where was that number written down? Like,
It's in the city charter, it's just in the, well, when?
Literally.
yeah, that's it. So
I don't know.
Like 100 years ago, that thing was written down,
I
or?
don't know. I was at, you know, I've been talking to people about this, unless you have a spouse that can take care of you, or you're in a position like me and I run an organization, you can't really run for school. You can't be on the school board. Like my dad is a bus driver, he drives from uni. Like he can't be on the board of education. He can't take that type of time. And so it really blocks out a lot of people from participating. So, you know, there's a lot of things related to the capacity of the office that I really want to see changed, so we can make this more accessible to other people that want to run. We don't get staffing, right? So if I wanted to host a thing like this with parents, it's all out of my own Gmail, my own time. If I want to get across the city to somewhere, it's out of my own pocket. It's like, you know, if I really want to vet a policy, right, I'm relying on the person from the school district to do it, and they have the other demands on their job, but I should have a legislative aid. Like we make some big decisions. We just approved another bond expenditure for $100 million to build and redo more school sites. You know, so it's a lot of big things that we have to look through, and the office isn't set up for us to be able to really do that to the level that we need to.
Is that budget allocation just like a piece of legislation that would have to pass, or?
Yeah, the city would, in order to make a change to the city charter, you're talking about the.
Well, just like any additional, like, forget the charter, just like additional things that you would need, like staffing, like a budget, budgeting, like, is that just a piece of legislation that we have to?
Yeah, that would be a part of our budget if we, not our payments, but if we had additional staffing for us. But, you know, that comes at the political risk of some issue coming up, like, oh, school board members are spending money on this and we don't have enough to pay teachers, like, you know, so that's the type of risk that we run if we try to do something like that.
Could you have somebody?
I think that's worth it. But.
Could you have somebody in the role of legislative aid when they weren't getting paid? Like somebody who was looking to get into politics and wanted to be able to put school board legislative aid on their resume?
Yeah, our legal counsel, I talked to my general counsel about that, and there's a lot of state laws that have changed around unpaid work, and so we couldn't legally do that, no. It had to be like under a certain amount of hours and X, Y, and Z.
Oh, yeah, just like how much do you feel like your experience or the reality has lined up with what you expected, and like what things were really different, either for better or for worse? And I guess like the other part of that question is like your sort of pothole story, I feel like is a stereotype that a lot of people have, like maybe a cynical stereotype of like these like inefficiencies or whatever that are happening. And has that actually been your experience, or do you think it differs between, for example, where you're working in a city hall job that you had earlier versus like the school board? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no way to actually know what this is like until you're in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, whatever I thought this was going to be, it is not. But I mean, I absolutely love it. Like this stuff is really fascinating to me, and I geek out on a lot of it. And I think in order to spend the time on it that I do, like that has to be the case. It's also new, you know. I've been less than 6 months into the role, so talk to me in 2 years and see how I'm feeling. In terms of the pothole analogy, there are some things that are like that, you know, that feel as egregious, and sometimes it's not intentional, right? And sometimes it is. So the types of, I mean, the stuff that's really disgusting is some of the settlements that we have to approve. You know, people settlements, yeah, types of issues that are happening at schools between personnel, between kids and adults. That's you know, that and those settlements are public after we vote on them. The issues aren't public, but what the amounts that we have to pay out are. We have like these long-standing issues around. Another example. We have vacancies right now for classified positions in the school district. So we have 135 openings for school nutrition workers and 70 openings for custodian workers. And this is in San Francisco. The unemployment rate for African Americans is over 50%. And so these positions only require a high school degree, and maybe a few additional requirements, like you have to take a class at City to be a custodian, you have to go to the civil service exam. And so I'm like, how do we have all these openings and communities out of work? Like what's going on in the HR department? Like how is this happening? And are you partnering with organizations to try to fill these jobs? And they're like, oh no, I hadn't thought about partnering with organizations. And so I do a simple Facebook post about these openings, and tons of people are like, oh, can we help? And other people are telling me, I applied and never heard anything. And I heard that from so many people. And so I go back to the superintendent, like, what's up? And people are asking, well, tell me the person's name. It's like, it doesn't matter what the person's name is. If I do a push to increase the value of these applications, can this office handle processing these people to get them jobs? Like, that's really the issue, So stuff like that still is like baffling to me.
But does it feel like surmountable, or does it feel like
that feels
this is the thing
fixable?
that's never going to, like, because that's sort of the thing that I think stops a lot of people from running, right? That they're just sort of like, it's politics, or it's this machine that just does whatever, and it feels like maybe some of those issues, or like maybe they exist and then you do the more important work, and then some of it gets left by the wayside, I guess.
Right. So that one feels fixable. The long-standing issues that have been really difficult to solve have been around our achievement gap, the achievement level between African American Latino students and white and Asian students. And San Francisco is actually wider than any other city in the state of California. We have the widest achievement gap in the state. And so that compelled me to run. And seeing that continue to play out in schools is like feels very difficult to try to interrupt. But it's also something that I think is worth committing, my career to. So that continues to frustrate me. It plays out in a lot of different ways, not just connected to test scores. So the rate that we suspend and expel African American students is far more than any other student group. When we have to approve expulsions, after the expulsion process, it looks like somebody gets put up for expulsion. It goes through a panel. It comes to the school board. The school board looks over the case. If it's a violation of the education code, we have to expel. If it's not, we have a vote to say if it should or shouldn't. And it feels like everybody I'm expelling is a black boy or a black girl, like every meeting. In some of the cases, they look like they weren't well vetted, so I'm asking all these questions. So we overturned expulsion since I've been on the board.
Do you know the race of the kids that come up? And is there a way to not know the race?
You mean for if we were voting on it?
It's just like there's no racial affiliation that you would know about, but that box just isn't checked.
Well, I guess there's a way to, disguise the race, we wouldn't do that, but.
Why not?
Because when we look at the student case, it goes over, it gives all
the variables like family or something?
No, it gives us all the information on the student. So it gives us their GPA, their gender, their first and last name. We have all the information on the student when we.
If you have a problem with that kind of racial disparity, maybe just not knowing the race might help.
That's kind of policy in some major hiring in major organizations where they'll take the name and so you can't tell gender or the race, and it's actually been very effective at sort
Yeah,
of.
this is
Civic bias,
Or
where
revealing
people are
things
making
that have
bad
already
decisions.
made
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is, yeah.
you're talking, you're using
Like
this
the
as a factor, you're
original.
like, this is a problem, I want like,
Right, I think.
to lower this number. You guys, I think, would want this at the earlier stages of the process. The problem is, I think that's like in person, the student is there for those earlier stages, and so you can't be like, let's do this, or I guess you could do it orchestra style, where you put the student in a, I don't know if you've seen that, where orchestras now do, their auditions are blind. So literally, the student would be like in a little curtained off area, and the people would not be able to use their like unconscious bias and their personal perception of what that person looks like as part of the decision-making process.
Right, yeah.
When kids get expelled, do they automatically get replaced in a different school? Like what, or are you just kicked out of the school system at the age of 15?
Yeah, we have a few school sites that we send students once they're expelled, and those sites, offer additional support systems that come from with a variety of different needs.
Okay.
Wait, is it a site or is it a school?
It's one of our school sites. This is
Okay,
it's a
So they continue to go to school, just
Right.
at a different location?
Right.
I'm just, I know there are a lot more questions, and we did get started a tiny bit late, but I also want to be sensitive to both Stevon's time and everyone else's. So let's take like last 2 questions, and then maybe we can continue whatever over evening.
I was just curious, it sounds like a lot of what you're describing is there is like this core of like, I have to show up at these meetings, do that, but then it's all this other stuff, people are just calling you, you're calling these other people, like, how much, like, could you, are there people maybe on the supervisors that are less proactive and are just like, oh, I show up at meetings, I review the paperwork I need to, and I vote on this stuff, and like, how much also are you actually empowered to like call that supervisor for the HR person and be like, hey, like, are you their boss and empowered to go call them, or are you just kind of, with the cloud of the office, can you affect change, and you're doing that just because that's, in your, how you see this office?
No, yeah, so the level of touch depends on the commissioner, and I also, I'm unmarried with no children, like, since some other people have kids, and so they have other very real time constraints. And everything is supposed to go through the superintendent. We just hired a new superintendent that is so funny because he's experienced, so he can manage commissioners. Like, so he's been handling me as of late, and I'm glad that he's like that because we hired a person that is supposed to be able to run a well-functioning office, and if I can get my questions answered, then that's really all that I want. Ultimately, I want to be able to keep good people, and for my whole temperament, I'm a pretty even measured person, and I don't mind getting into a really big argument with somebody, because it's just about the matter. It's not about somebody personally. I think we do have a lot of really good people that work for the school district, and I don't want to scare anybody off. So I want us to be able to keep and cultivate great talent, because this is all a human enterprise. Yes, I do use the cloud of the office to get answers to questions. I'm not staff. The only person that reports to the board is the superintendent, and I want to respect those lines. So I guess that answers the question.
Just a quick follow-on. So the board can technically fire the superintendent? Or,
Yeah, that's what we do.
So that would be some power going
Yeah,
all the way
so that
down to
person
the
is
organization.
reporting to you guys.
The superintendent.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Two-part question. The first one, are there such a thing as political bias inside the group? Like, do you end up aligning and voting for something that you might necessarily like in exchange of someone else voting in favor of something that you like? That's the first question. The second question, I just forgot somehow.
Why somebody else did that? I do that all the time. Like what? The exchange, like the voting, the trading votes, is that like that? That hasn't really come up as much, and people are, I think, a little more principled because there are so few of us, and I think we think about, people are calculated about voting no if they know it's going to pass. You know, if they want to make a statement about something. So, for example, some people are completely anti-charter. So, you know, charters are legally allowed to exist. You can't just not approve a charter unless you want to get sued. So if there are 6 yes votes for a charter, a person can afford to say no, so that they can make sure people know. You know, I'll never vote to approve a charter.
Okay, I remember the second question, and that is, what percentage of the work that you guys do is, I should probably explain the background. We are trying to work on a platform that's going to allow groups to elect proxy representatives to public office. And that means that the person wouldn't have an opinion but of his or her own, but everything the person does will have to go through the group that will make online real-time decisions for that person to do. But that means that only stuff that is public could go through this platform, and stuff that is private or secret will have to be determined by the person without the support of the group. So what percentage of the work that you do is the stuff that you could share publicly with your, the people that voted for you, versus what percentage of the work is the stuff that is only for people?
Yeah, I don't really know how to break that down. A lot of our meetings are public, and if we are meeting, unless it's a designated closed session meeting, we have to also make things public. So we have this thing called the Brown Act. So the Brown Act is like this legislation that basically creates rules for what legislators can talk about with each other. So if there are 4 of us, if 4 members were here, there would have to be a public notice letting everyone know that 4 members for the school board are at the same location. And if we want to talk about a matter that's like, that we could vote on, I'm not allowed to talk about it with more than 2 other people. Because if it gets to a 4th person, then it's a public meeting.
These are 2 other supervisors, or 2 other commissioners.
Yeah, so I can tell you something, and I can tell you something. But if I want to talk to you about it, you know, that could be a violation of the Brown Act. And definitely if I told you what you said, that would be a violation of the Brown Act. So.
Well, there are so many more
that was
things.
Like really in the weeds.
Yeah, and that sounds like a really interesting idea as well.
It does. In fact, I have a friend who works as a county supervisor, and I was like, "Can't you just call in for this meeting?" He's like, "I could, but I need to post a public notice at the spot I'm calling in from a week in advance, and have to have this like a designated, like this is even though his constituents are hundreds of miles away, he still has to post this public notice to be able to like attend the supervisor's meeting remotely." I was like, "Oh my god, this is so ridiculous."
Well, before we go, and we have some food, some Mediterranean platters for everyone, and some water and wine and beer. First of all, Stevon, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I found this absolutely fascinating. One thing I do want to mention, because I don't think Stevon will himself, is I know you still have some campaign debt, yes? Do you have a way that if we wanted to donate sort of retroactively to your campaign, we could go? Is that on your website?
Yeah, it's just StevonCook.com.
So yeah, as
Wait, what is it?
StevonCook.com. Which yeah, just hearing a little bit about the $500 does not seem like a very fair amount for the work that you're doing. So. Yeah, everyone can stick around, and we just continue the conversation over some food. Thank you again so much. Because I know some people.
For some of us, we're highly dated.
No, I just like makes me.
I'm so serious about that.
Yeah.
Easiest job, just go to.
You should
Go
have also.
If you want to fire,
Go somewhere else, okay?
Yeah.
Let's go, that's your advice.
yeah. Or there's also a lot of political groups, so if you want to play a part in Swang, who
Yeah.
gets voted for.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's good.
Yeah, so join an active group that have already has that influence.
Oh, seriously? That's actually not very surprising. I am actually